Lisa Rubel from Love to Color My World, and I'm here today to walk you through block number 9 from Sit and Sew Fabrics Sunshine and Shadows block of the month. We've got 8 blocks done already, but this is a quilt along that you can join at any point in time and just catch up at your leisure. There are videos for each month's block, and at the end we'll show you how to put the whole quilt together. So today we are going to be making this block up here, which from far away looks like a star and is actually made out of 8 flying geese units. So we'll be making 8 of those and assembling them, and you'll be amazed at how quickly this block goes together. So let's get started. I've got my pieces cut, and I've got 4 gray rectangles, 4 yellow rectangles, and then 16 of my white on white squares. So the first thing I'm going to do for making these flying geese is to draw a diagonal line on the wrong side of my white squares. Do this with a fabric marking pen from one corner to the other and get it drawn on all 16 of your squares, and then we can start sewing. So to make our flying geese unit, we're going to need 2 white squares with the drawn line on the back and 1 rectangle. I'm going to start with a gray rectangle, and I'm going to position my marked square on the left end of my rectangle with the line going from the bottom corner up to the center. So what I'm going to do is stitch on this line, and then we'll come back, trim it, and press it. So I've stitched on my marked line, and now we're going to trim the excess fabric to 1/4 inch past that seam line. I'm going to line up the 1/4 inch line on my ruler on my stitch line and cut off those 2 triangles. Then come over to my iron, and I like to press down on a stitch line first to sort of let the thread sink in, and then we're going to press it towards that triangle. There we go. Now we're halfway done. I'm going to take my second marked square and lay it on the right end of that rectangle, so the line goes from the lower right point or lower right corner up to that center point. And same thing, I'm going to stitch on that drawn line. And I'm going to end up stitching over my first white triangle, and that's what's supposed to happen. Okay, I stitched on my drawn line, and I'm going to trim that excess fabric to 1/4 inch past my seam. Then take it over to my iron, press on that seam, and then press that triangle open. There we go. So here is my flying geese unit. You can see if we measure it, should be 6.5 inches across and then 3.5 from top to bottom. And you have this overlap here at the top, and that will become your seam allowance. So that should be there. So what we're going to do is make 4 of these with the gray large triangle, and then make 4 more with the yellow rectangle to make the large triangle. And then we'll join them together to complete our block. All right, if you've got your 4 yellow flying geese units and your 4 gray flying geese units all pieced, we're ready to start assembling the block. So what we're going to do is lay it all out and then look at how we're going to put it together. So each 1/4 of the block is made from putting together a gray flying geese unit and a yellow flying geese unit. And they're all pointing kind of around in a circle. So this is what our block will look like, and these dark gray triangles end up making a bit of a star unit in the center. So we're going to start out by joining each of the gray units to a yellow unit. And to do so, I'm going to fold it over. I'm actually going to flip it over so I have the yellow unit on top, because then I can see where I'm piecing and make sure that it's as accurate as possible. So I'm going to put a pin in either end and then one in the middle. And when I go to sew with my 1/4 inch seam allowance, it should work out that way, but as you're stitching along, you want to aim your foot so that your needle crosses just to the seam allowance side of the tip of your triangle here. And if you do that, you'll end up with a nice point right there. So keep that in mind as you sew. So we're going to do this with all 4 of our 1/4 units, and then we'll have a piece with 2 triangles, and we'll finish assembling the block. So I've joined my gray and my yellow flying geese units together, and if you look, you can see my stitch line is just beyond where that point is. So when I open this up, I've got a really nice point on my yellow triangle. So I'm going to press these so the seam allowance goes toward the dark gray triangle. There we go. Okay, I've got all 4 of these now. Now this is a good point to just stop and make sure that they're all the same, that you didn't accidentally sew one with the points going together or with the gray on the bottom of the yellow, because you'd rather fix that now than having to fix that after you have your whole block assembled. So make sure that all 4 of your units look the same. And then what we're going to do is lay them back out how we had them before we joined the units, just like that. Then we're going to sew these 2 together and these 2, and then join the 2 half units. Now I'm going to do the same thing when I sew these together. Is I'm going to pin the edges and then keep an eye on where these seam allowances meet so that I can keep my points really nice on my units. So I'm going to pin these 2. And on this unit, I've got a triangle here, and I've got one on the back side kind of tucked under. So what I'm going to do is put a pin right through where those seams intersect, and then kind of turn it over and see if I hit the spot on the other side the same way. And I did on my second try, so I'm going to put that pin in, and so now I can aim for where those seams meet, and I should get a nice point on this piece and on this piece. I'm going to do the same here. And then as you pin these, you can always just open them back up and just make sure that nothing turned around while you were laying them on top of each other, and make sure that it looks like the pattern does. So that one is good, and I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to look at, put a pin in where those seams join, and then try to hit the same spot on the other side. A little high. I'm going to come back and try again. Okay. And then I will stitch down both of those lines, and we'll come back and look at our half units. So I've got my 2 half block units sewn together. What I'm going to do is press them, and I'm going to press them in opposite directions so that the seams can nest when I join them together. So here is the top one. I've got my seam going to the left. Just going to double check here. So that's my bottom, so the seam will go in the opposite direction. Okay, so before I sew these together, I'm going to look one more time at my pattern, and I've got gray triangle pointing that way, gray triangle pointing down, gray triangle pointing that way, and gray triangle pointing up. So my layout is solid, and now I just need to sew this last seam and the block will be done. And as I pin this, you can see we have the same situation where we're matching up points along the side. So I'm actually going to peel it back a tiny bit and align those 2 points together and then put a pin right in there so that I have a little more control over those points touching. So same thing, I'm gonna fold this back a little bit, pull that down, and get those points as close to each other as I can, and then put a pin right in there. I like to put the pin right after where the join is, because then I can leave it in longer. If you put it in before your join, then you pull the pin out and the fabric can move. But by putting it in after, I've got a little more control over it. So I've got my halves joined together to make the block, and let's press it and then we'll take a look at it. You can press this seam in either direction. And I'm just going to give it, we've got some bulky seams in there, so I'll just give it a good firm press. You can also press your seams open if you want to eliminate a little bit of that bulk. Okay, so you can see my points meet up pretty nicely in all 4 of those spots. I've got all my triangles in the right spot, and it's a pretty cool looking block. So that's it for block number 9, and next month we'll be working on block number 10, which is this one right here. I hope you had fun sewing with me today, and I look forward to seeing you next month. We're working our way through this block of the month. It's hard to believe that we're 3/4 done. Head over to Sit and Sew Fabrics to check out all of their kits, some that are pre-cut pieces and some that are made out of fat quarter bundles and that type of thing, and invite your friends to join our Sunshine and Shadows block of the month.